Hi everybody, this is Lisa from Paint and Create. I'm very excited to show you how I created this faux tile look in a brand new bathroom. So watch the video, leave some comments, and let me know what you think. So this is an area in our basement that was plumbed for a toilet, sink, and tub or shower. It's a kind of a strange configuration, so we had to work with where the plumbing was put in by the builder. Probably would have worked better if I would have put a standing shower stall, but I insisted on a soaker tub with jets because of what I do for a living, and I deserve it. So just a quick history of the project. We put up studs and drywall. I did all of the mudding and taping of the drywall seams to get it very smooth. I also received some used cedar planking from my friend Mindy that she was actually getting rid of and willing to give it away. So I took it, not even knowing what I was going to do with it, and it turned out to be exactly within inches of how much I needed for that back wall. So took all the nails out, nailed it to the studs, and repainted it, filled all the gaps, and I think it's lovely. I love the texture of it. Because this is in a basement, it's kind of a dark space, so my idea of how I want it to look is very light and soothing. Keep in mind, during all of this filming, I'm only using work lights because the electric and the final lights aren't hooked up yet, so it's kind of difficult to show everything in detail because of the lighting. The next thing I did was install this click-together waterproof laminate pergo floor. I did it all by myself with basic tools and a miter saw, and it's again a very light and airy color, and I love it. The tub surround was built out of 2x4 and 2x6 construction, and we put backer board on the top because I was going to tile the tub, but since changed my mind, so my next video is going to show what I do to that area. For this video though, the first step I did was to apply this Textureline Sharktooth primer, which is a gritty primer all over the walls, ceiling, and even on the tub base. It's something that you can put lime plaster on, which is what I'm going to apply to all the walls. And here's a picture of the area that I'm going to focus on for this video. After the Sharktooth primer dried, I used this Textureline Texturestone plaster, which is a very hard plaster, tinted it to a medium gray, and applied it to the area. At this point, I had a good laugh at myself because I realized that my complicated plan for this focal area was going to be impeded by the gigantic soaker tub that isn't set and can't be stood on yet. So I actually had to build some supports so I could put some planks on top. So now here's a surface I can kneel and stand on, and the dry Textureline plaster with a 12-inch grid laid out. Hi everybody, it's Lisa with Paint Create. I'm getting ready to start my raised stencil. I've prepared the wall with a tinted light gray plaster, which has a little texture in it, and it's gonna emulate the grout. I've also taped off 12-inch squares because that's the size of my stencil. And it's gonna give you don't have to do that with the stencil, but it's gonna create more grout lines and a more realistic tile look. First thing I did was I found the center of my wall. And because I have 3/8 inch tape, I divided that by 2 to have 3/16. So I moved that mark over 3/16. That created my center line. So I centered my first line on the middle, like a tile layer would do. So the tiles to the right and to the left are going to be even. And I plan to have a full stencil at the top, and it's going to be almost a full stencil at the bottom of the base by the bathtub. I kind of marked off all these little blooms so I don't make a mistake, because I'm going to start with every other one, let that dry, and then go back and fill in the other ones. So I'm going to use a white Venetian plaster from Textureline. I'll put the product information in the description and where to get it. And I'm going to show you how I'm going to do the first stencil. So it's very hard to see because the stencil mylar is clear, but I have it up on this square right here. I'm going to use a Japanese trowel, just because these are my favorite. You can use a regular Italian flatter, stiffer trowel, but I like the movement of the thin Japanese trowels. So I'm going to go ahead and load it and show you how I'm going to create the first layer of my raised tile look. So I loaded my trowel with the white plaster, and I'm going to go about as thick as the Mylar stencil is. And this is just my first layer because I can't do anything simple. I gotta do everything fancy, but you could get away with just doing this and it would be a really cool look. By the way, I have a stencil spray. I actually use Super 77, which isn't really made for stencil, but it's a great repositionable stencil spray, but there's a lot on the market that you can use. I'm still planning on getting some bleed through, and that's okay, because that can all be touched up at the end. I want it fairly smooth, but a little bit of variety is fine, because they're going to look like handmade tiles, and I'm going to do some other effects on top. It's lifting a little bit of my tape, but that can be pushed back on. And if you get a little bit on the wall, that's fine. Okay, so that's my first one. I'll take a still picture so you can see what it looks like up close. Okay, my next step was, after all my Venetian plaster was done and dry, I coated everything with a satin white paint. The next product I'm going to apply is a Crackle medium, a Crackle paste. It needs to be applied at a 1/8 inch thickness, so I took 3 stencils and glued them all together. Hi guys, we are to the really exciting step. There's going to be more steps after this, but this is the really cool, fun one. I'm using a new product to me. It's called Crackle Paste by Golden. Here's actually, I bought a gallon of it because I'm going to be using quite a lot of it. This is what it looks like. Golden is a great company for professional artists, but you can buy it at most DIY stores and on the internet, so it's really easy and accessible to get. I had never used it before, although I've used a lot of different Crackle mediums. This is a one and done paste. I've used two-step processes, and I had a little learning curve. If this was for a client, I would have done a full start to finish sample board first, but I didn't because I got excited and I was just gonna go for it because this is for my own house, and I messed up. So just know it's okay to mess up. This is just paint and plaster and it can be fixed. And I basically I did like 8 of them and it just didn't crack right, not to what I expected or wanted it to look like. So I sanded them off. I got my Festool vac sander and sanded them off and went back to the drawing board and started on a sample and found that they do recommend like a 1/16th to an 1/8, I think an 1/8 of an inch thick. The thicker you go, the bigger the cracks are going to be. And I wanted a fine crackle to look like a handmade ceramic tile with small crackles in it, which is kind of a cool look that I've been seeing in a lot of stores right now, and a lot of my clients have even purchased. I'm going to show a picture, a still picture of what it looks like up close because it's hard to see from here. But I want to show you how it's applied. This is my triple thick stencil. I actually bought 3 of them and glued them all together to get the thickness that I wanted. I tried cutting some plexiglass and stuff, but I wasn't getting the detail, so this is just the best way to do it. You don't have to worry about copyright problems or anything. I mentioned using the stencil spray. This is the Super 77 that I use. It's really strong. The fumes are strong, so make sure you have a well-ventilated area, but it works really well. And when you're done, the way to get it off is with Goo Gone. That's a solvent-based cleaner, and it's gonna melt away the glue and take it off the back of your stencil. So the way I've been applying this, and it's tricky, I'm gonna try to show you without swearing on camera. So excuse me if I do, because I did plenty of that last night. It's really hard to get it this thick and smooth. It's made more for artists doing with a little tiny palette knife on canvas, but I'm thinking outside the box. So you need a lot of it, and it's not cheap, but it's really cool. It's really fluffy, and I'm gonna load my trowel a lot because it's gonna take a lot to fill this triple thick stencil. So I tried a bunch of different trowels thinking a big trowel would keep it the smoothest across this 12-inch stencil, but found the little trowel just worked the best. And even with that, it's frustrating. So do a few at a time and go take a break if you need to in between. So I just start on the corners, just like I would kind of any other plaster job. And I did find that it wasn't crackling well over the Venetian plaster, even though that was an acrylic medium. So I ended up painting the wall with a satin white wall paint. And the white did 2 things. It helped create the cracks, and it gave this, even though it looks like white plaster, it was drying kind of creamy and not giving me the look I want. I'm going to be doing some glazes and stuff over this, but I wanted a more white base. So it's tricky because I think most Crackle mediums have different types of glues in them, so it wants to lift off certain places. So you want to get it, so your triple thick stencil is a guide for thickness. So you'll want to keep it even with that top stencil. see what I mean. It's kind of frustrating to keep it smooth. And you're not gonna have perfection, which is okay. You can always go back and fill it in, but it sands really nice. So in the end, you can just sand off any little trowel lines. See what I mean? It's frustrating. So it just takes some patience, and you gotta take one at a time. I have, I think, 46 squares that need this done, and many more steps afterwards. Somehow I have to keep my sanity. Okay, so that's pretty good. So I'm gonna do a whole bunch of these and probably come back tomorrow and do the next step. One more thing before I go, I wanna show you what it looks like when you take it off. It's kind of cool. I don't know if the camera's gonna show you the thickness of it, but it's kind of satisfying. And this glue should last you probably about 5 different areas until you have to reapply the glue. So here's a picture of the Crackle paste still wet, and here it is dry. Hi everybody, I'm back. I have crackled most of the wall now, well, pretty much all of it. I finished last night. Some of it's still drying. It can take 1 to 3 days to fully crackle depending on how thick it is. It's dry enough to sand. I had sanded most of these shapes yesterday by doing, like, I don't know if you can see it because this is a really hard thing to show on camera, but a beveled edge on each shape to give it a more pillowed, realistic tile look. So now I have a couple that I applied last night that haven't been sanded. So I just want to show you how I'm doing that. This is a very soft, fluffy medium that sands very powdery and very easy. So I'm just running my finger along those edges to create that extra dimension. And it's worth the extra effort because I think it really makes it look more three-dimensional and a lot more realistic. And because it's so sandable, if there's any trowel marks in the tile shape, that can be sanded out as well. I'm using 320 sandpaper, so something pretty fine because it's so easy to sand. I do have a Dremel that I could use, but I didn't want it to be too aggressive. I kind of like using my hands and feeling what I'm doing. You can see how easy that shapes. So then I'm gonna vacuum all this off really well because a lot of the dust gets into the cracks, and I'll get ready for the next step. Next, I rolled 1 coat of Golden's GAC 500, which acts as an isolation coat. It actually hardened up that soft paste and made it not so absorbent for my next step. Okay, for the next step, I'm going to be glazing the tile. So for the glaze, I use Design 77 Glaze, which is one of the best glazes on the market. It has an extreme open time. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes that's a bad thing. For this project, I wanted to make sure I was able to wipe off the glaze easily. So this was my #1 choice. It can be tinted with universal colorants, acrylic flows, or even latex paint. So in this case, I used 1 cup of the Design 77 Glaze to 1 tablespoon of agreeable gray latex paint. And this is the glaze mixture. I wanted just a really light color. I did several samples and I was using medium grays, and they ended up making the cracks look very dark. So this was the winning combination. So I'll show you how I applied it next. I'm on to the next step, which is glazing the tile, which is gonna bring out the cracks a little more, but I want it to be pretty subtle. So I mixed up the glaze as I showed you earlier, and I'm just using a 4-inch whiz roller with a 3/8" nap to apply it. And what I want to do is press pretty firmly because I want to get that glaze in the cracks mostly. When this is dry, I'm going to show you how it looks because it does dry a little bit darker. But I want to make sure I'm pushing it into the cracks. I have a bucket of water next to me and 2 clean sponges. So I'm going to take the first clean sponge and wipe off just the tops of the tiles. A cell sponge is really nice because it only touches the top surface if you don't press too hard. I'm going to come back with my second clean one and do the same thing. So it's really, it is toning the body of the tile, but it's mostly going to settle into those lines, those cracks, and give a really authentic, subtle look. Okay, so I'm going to keep going and I'll show you how it looks when it's all dry, and then on to the next step. Here's a quick pan of the glaze while it's still wet, so it's setting. The first 3 have been glazed and then the last one is not, so you can see how it highlights those cracks. After the glaze dried for at least 24 hours, because again it is a slow drying glaze, I rolled on 4 coats of this Varathane gloss finish. It's exterior rated and waterproof. Here's a few pictures of the final product. Again, the lighting is terrible, I know, because I had construction lights, but it's very glossy in person, which I love. It looks like real tile. And a few panned out pictures. A few areas of the wall. Here's some close-ups with the crackle showing and the dimension. I am ecstatic about the final look. I just love it. It's exactly what I pictured at 2 a.m. in the middle of the night when I came up with this idea, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video tutorial and try some of these products or are inspired to do a project of your own. Again, if you have a chance, like the video and subscribe. I'll be doing the tub surround next, show a little bit about how I did the lime plaster, bring in the vanity, do some woodworking around the tub and baseboards, and finish off the bathroom. So stay tuned, make sure you subscribe, and have a great day.